Hello my friends, I'm sitting here on the floor in the sunroom and I'm going to answer some of your questions about buying a house. I got a lot of questions. I did do a Q&A over on Instagram that's saved in a highlight if you want to go see if there's any other questions that got answered, but some of the more lengthy questions I got, instead of typing them out onto my stories, I thought I would just sit down and do a little Q&A on here so I can just kind of be my normal wordy self and explain some of my answers. So anyways, if you're new here, hi, I'm Faith. I just bought a house. I am 23 years old. I live in Minneapolis and I just bought my first home and I'm so grateful and excited. And I did film a tour earlier this week if you want to go see that. But for now, I'm going to hop into questions because I'm going to be honest, I knew nothing about buying a house going into this. Absolutely nothing. Like, it was to the point where when I started thinking about it, I literally called my mom and I was like, Mom, how do you buy a house? Because I didn't even know where to start. I feel like this isn't something that you learn. A question I got a lot was just asking me to explain the general process, start to finish, what buying a house was. I wish I had had someone to kind of sit down and explain this to me when I first started, so I'm going to explain it here. The first step, if you're using a realtor, is to find a realtor. So I recommend using a realtor. I think a lot of people do for a reason. I know some people feel strongly about not using one because there are fees associated, but this being my first time and not knowing anything about the process, I really wanted someone to guide me through it. And so I decided that I needed to find a realtor. And advice that I got and saw a lot when looking for a realtor is, if possible, get a referral from a family member or a friend. And then once you find your realtor, you call them and you basically get signed on with them. So I signed a contract saying, like, I won't work with any other realtors. I think it's pretty standard stuff as far as I know. The realtor is also on the hook for certain things throughout the duration of your partnership. And you're basically just mutually agreeing to work together to find you a house for a period of time. For me, it was 6 months. If I hadn't found a house in 6 months, we would have had to renew the contract because that's how long it extended for. And that was all pretty straightforward. I feel like that might be sounding like a little sketchy, but I researched it and seems pretty common practice, and I didn't have any issues with that. And then after that, you start house hunting. So my realtor was amazing. He was very patient with me and was really willing to explain not only the process to me, but also more details. So for example, I knew going into buying this house that I was not buying my forever house. And I also knew going into buying this house that things like school district weren't a priority for me because I will not be having school-aged children in this house. And just factors like that, my realtor was really helpful, like narrowing down neighborhoods I want to aim for, neighborhoods that might be too out of my price range, just that sort of thing. There's just a lot of knowledge base there that I found really helpful to have a realtor for. And then once we started going seeing houses, not only was the realtor super helpful in pointing out things that might be helpful for resale down the line, because that is definitely something I'm trying to be aware of. Like I said, it's not my forever house, so you don't want to buy a bad investment. Even though this house is more to me than an investment, it is still at the end of the day an asset, and I think it's unwise to make unwise investments in assets. So anyways, I was definitely at least semi-cognizant of resale value, and I didn't want to buy something that my realtor said was basically not going to gain or even lose value. So anyways, that was super helpful. In addition, my realtor, at least, I don't know if all realtors would be like this, had a really amazing knowledge base of what to look for in the house in terms of green flags and red flags. So for example, every time we'd go to a house, we'd walk around the exterior first, make sure the grading around the foundation was sloped away, make sure the gutters were in good shape, look for any signs of wear and tear, cracking, make sure that the attic had venting. I mean, there were all sorts of things, basically like a checklist that he would walk me through every time. And that was incredibly helpful. And we house hunted for about 2 months, and we were going quite slow because we'd only see maybe 2 or 3 houses a week because I had pretty specific criteria. I was looking in a pretty broad area, but I was very limited in terms of budget. So there was just only so much stock in the market that I could look at each week. Oh, I also want to say my realtor connected me with a lender that they work with in-house to get my mortgage secured. That was super helpful and easy and standard. You basically just submit like your tax documents. Not as scary as I thought it would be. I was really nervous about that part. But it was really nice that my realtor just had one in-house. So if you're looking for a realtor, I recommend looking for that maybe. Back to making an offer. basically, once you've house hunted enough and you kind of get an idea of what you do and don't like, and then you do finally find a house that you like and would be willing to purchase, you put in an offer. Unfortunately, in this market, at least here in Minneapolis, it's standard to put in offers quite a bit higher than the asking price. For example, I put in an offer on a house, the first house I put an offer on, I put in almost $60K over, no inspection, and still lost it to someone who went even higher. And then the second house I put an offer on was also $60K over, no inspection, and I got the price right, but then lost it to someone who paid all cash. So that's the part of the process that gets tricky and honestly really devastating. Sounds kind of dramatic, but to be honest, when you put an offer on a house, if it gets accepted, you basically get the house. So it's a very emotional process because you're basically like, I want that house, like I want to buy that house. And then you just have to wait and see if you get chosen to buy that house, which feels really counterintuitive because you're like, I'm sitting here with the financing, like I want to buy this, but unfortunately there are other people who are interested too, and you just have to wait and see. So yes, I made 3 offers throughout my house hunting process, and my third offer was accepted. My first 2 offers were denied, and I lost those 2 houses. When you're making an offer, there is no money down. There's nothing lost when you lose out on an offer. You're not a financial risk to making and then losing an offer. It's not like you have to put down a deposit or something that you don't get back. So it's just sad. When you do finally get an offer accepted, you enter into a window called the inspection window. And depending on the terms of your offer contract, that can be between 3 and 7 days from the time of the offer being accepted. And so in that window, you have earnest money down. Earnest money is typically 1 to 2% of the price of the house. And you transfer that money and put that money down. You enter into an inspection window and you get all your inspections. And in your inspection window, you are allowed to back out for whatever reason the inspections find without losing your earnest money. You get it back if you back out because of inspections. Like let's say you make an offer on a house, it gets accepted, you put your earnest money down, you get your inspections done in the window, but then the inspection finds huge issues, like the foundation is screwed up or the roof needs replacing, huge, big fixes, then you are allowed to back out and you keep your earnest money. There's no risk there. However, after the inspection window is closed, and it closes like very specifically between 3 to 7 days, and your contract specifies that, and it closes like there's a hard line, it's midnight that day. Once that window closes, you are now obligated to buy this house, and if you back out, you lose your earnest money. So after inspection, there's typically a 21 to 45 day window before you can actually close on the house and get the keys. This is the time that's needed for your financing to get secured, for the appraisal on the house, and for title work to get transferred, etc. And so after inspection, you enter into your closing window, and once you're in your closing window, you cannot back out of the house unless you're willing to lose your earnest money, which I think some people do, and then you just lose that money. So anyways, once I finish my inspections, all of that is done, and then you have set a closing date when you put your offer in. Like I said, X day, like, the 7th of June. It's just a specific day, and when that day comes around, you go to your realtor's office and you sign a gazillion papers. It was literally a stack of papers like this big, and then you get the keys and you have bought your first house. All right, next question I got. I'm trying to keep these kind of together by theme, so I'm sticking with the actual process first. The next question I got was, how did I know that this house was the one? And honestly, I feel like your whole life when you think about buying a house, you think of finding like the house, like the dream house. And maybe one day you do, one day if you have enough budget. But to be honest, if you're like me and you're a first-time homebuyer, you have pretty limited budget, you're not going to find your dream house. You're basically going to make concessions somehow, somewhere when buying your house. That was kind of my takeaway from the process. All 3 houses that I put offers on, I was making some sort of concession for, and it's just about the other good things about it outweighing those concessions. I did go into the house hunting process knowing that I had a few non-negotiables that just really needed to be the case in whatever house I purchased. Otherwise, I tried to be pretty open-minded because, to be honest, it was a really cutthroat environment. I mean, like I said, people are getting offers 80, 90K over asking. I can't afford that, even for houses that are small and theoretically in my price range and need work. I mean, it was just honestly crazy. And so it got to the point where I felt like I was making more and more concessions, and I was kind of talking to myself one night and I was like, I'm not sure I want that. Like, you know, you put your life savings down on something, and of course there are going to be some concessions, but if you get to the point where you feel like you're just sacrificing everything you care about, that might be a time to stop and reevaluate in some way. And you can talk to your realtor about that. In particular, to answer this question, I knew that this house was the one. At that point, we had been house hunting for about 2 months. I'd probably seen 50 or 60 houses in the area. And on the day we came to see this house, it was super gloomy and super rainy. And one of my big non-negotiables for any house I purchased was lighting. I really needed good lighting in the house because of my job. I just need to have windows and natural light. And it was super, super dark, stormy day when we came to see this house, so I had no idea what the lighting was like. But I guess I just had a gut feeling. I really loved this house. And yes, I was making some concessions for it. Like, for example, I knew when I made an offer on this house that we were going to have to redo the kitchen. Like, I knew that, and it was a concession I was willing to make because I loved the other bones and the other parts of the house so much. And yeah, I think it's really about looking at the bones, of course, looking at the neighborhood and the area. I love this neighborhood, lots of like tree-lined sidewalks, and we're really close to some lovely parts of the city. To answer the question, I feel like I'm kind of dancing around the question, but that's because I'm not quite sure what the true answer to it is. It was definitely a decent amount gut feeling, and it was also a decent amount of thinking to myself, like, yes, there are some concessions about this house, but given the experiences you've had and the other 60 houses you've seen over the past 2 months, maybe for your price range, this is about as good as it gets, which sounds bad to say out loud. Like, this is amazing. I love this house. Do not get me wrong. But I do think you gain a bit of perspective after months of house hunting. You kind of know what's out there on the market. You know what's achievable for you. And when I finally found this place and it was achievable for me, and it did have so many things I loved, like that staircase in the entryway that I talked about in the tour, and the big, beautiful bedrooms upstairs, and the charm and the age and the yard, it just, I don't know, we visited, and even though it was a super cloudy, rainy day, I had no idea what the light was. I was like, let's do it. And I got my offer accepted. So that is kind of how I knew it was the one. And then the next question I got was, any advice for home ownership cold feet? I'm not quite sure I'm the best person to ask for this because I have honestly dreamed of owning a house like my entire life. I have dreamed of owning a house since I was 14, and it's been one of my biggest goals. I've been saving forever, and yeah. So I wouldn't say I necessarily had cold feet going into the process. Like, I knew I wanted to buy a house. However, there were definitely moments in the house buying process, because between like before we started hunting and then during the closing period, it was about a 3.5 month process where I said to myself, I was like, I just want to be done. Like, I would hit a bit of a breaking point and just be so overwhelmed and just say to myself, like, I just want to keep renting. Like, this is too much. You know, it was really emotionally draining. I had a really hard time keeping up with work on top of all the house hunting, and it was just honestly really hard for me emotionally. I get really emotionally invested in things like this, and I don't mean to complain. I mean, of course, I'm incredibly grateful that I was in the position to struggle that way. I mean, that's a privileged way to struggle, of course. But I definitely had cold feet like throughout the process, not beforehand, but throughout. And my advice is trying to remember the end goal. And for me, the end goal was peace, privacy, not sharing. You know, when you're renting, you're often sharing walls with other people, and we've had a lot of bad luck with that in the past. A yard, I'm a big gardener, just a lot of things that I've really always wanted and were basically only achievable through buying. I mean, you could get a house, or you could get a yard if you rented a house, but even still, it's not your yard. So anyways, my advice is just to kind of focus on the end purpose of why you're buying a house, and I don't even know, just kind of zone out during the process. It's a rough process, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, mine went quite smoothly, but it was still pretty rough. So that's my answer to that question. So another question I got is Austin coming with me to the new house? Yes, he is coming with me. Austin and I have been together for 6 years since high school. I mean, we're very much life partners at this point. So yes, of course he's coming with me. That was the plan all along, and he has been a gem getting started with some of these renovations. Austin is very handy. He He's actually an engineer, so he's really great with math and measurements, and he has been a godsend in these renovations, and I'm really grateful for him and really grateful for this next chapter together. I mean, it's crazy going from being two high schoolers to being two full-blown adults living in our own house. So yes, he's definitely coming with to the new house. You can basically assume that we'll be sticking together wherever we go in the future. And then another question I got is, just saw the kitchen. I had posted a picture of the gutted kitchen on my Instagram stories, and this person said, just saw the kitchen. Why take on such a huge, in all caps, project in your first ever house? 2 question marks. This made me laugh because it did feel like a tiny bit condescending. I don't think it was meant super mean-hearted. Regardless, what can I say? I'm an ambitious person. I'm willing to work hard. I'm willing to put in a lot of hours. Austin is the same. We both went into this with eyes wide open. We knew what we were getting into. And honestly, I think we were both kind of born with the how hard can it be gene. Austin and I are always taking on projects. It's kind of who we are, and I think we're really matched in that way. And this is by far our biggest project yet, and it's going to take time and money and expertise, but we're willing to be patient, and we're willing to learn, and we're willing to work hard. So that is why we're taking on such a huge project. I will also say that obviously while renovating a kitchen, it's not functional. It made the most sense to do the kitchen while we still have access to our apartment. Our lease runs through the end of summer, so that way we still have a kitchen we can cook in while this one isn't functional. So that was also part of the decision. Okay, so the last question I wanted to dive into on here is, I got a lot of questions about financials. In particular, this person asked for any advice for saving up for a house as a young person. And I do want to be completely transparent on here, and I 100% recognize that I am coming from a privileged position in a lot of ways, and I am incredibly grateful. And I know that my situation is not the same situation as a lot of other people. So everyone's situation is different. I'm going to do my best to give a bit of context into my own situation and also give some more broad, generalized advice. But to be honest, everyone's situation is so different. Not all advice is going to work for everyone. So I'm going to do my best, but I just wanted to say that beforehand. First, I wanted to give a little context into my situation. Like I said earlier, I have literally been dreaming of buying a house for the past decade. Pretty much any time I could save, when I didn't have other expenses that needed tending to, I was putting that money into a long-term savings account that I've had for 10 years. And it has been a very, very slow process, but it was just kind of always a priority for me, and that is definitely not the case for everyone. I know some people really want to prioritize traveling while they're young. Some people want to prioritize maybe career moves. I mean, I don't even think I can list all the other priorities people have, but there are a lot of them, and they're equally valid. Just for me personally, that's truly been my biggest dream, is to own a house. And so I think it was a much bigger priority to save for me than it is for the average person, and that's completely okay. I will also say, for my personal situation, even with 10 years worth of savings down, I will be honest, I could barely enter this market. There were a couple times in the process where I was getting outbid by tens of thousands of dollars on houses that were at the lowest end of the budget here in Minneapolis. Basically, there aren't houses for much less than $300,000 here, and I was kind of in that low range there. And even those priced houses were going for literally 130,000 over asking, which is insane. And there were several times in the process where I was like, I don't have enough money. Like, I can't enter this market, because I don't know why people who are shopping in that price range have the budget to go that far over budget. Like, that was a question I had a lot in the process, is how are people who are in my same price range affording to go that far over asking? And I'm still not quite sure. But anyways, given the price range in my city, I was at the lowest end of what was on the market. And even that, I really struggled to get an offer accepted, and was really only able to do so because I purchased a house that needed quite a bit of work. The other 2 houses that I put offers on didn't need as much work, and I do think that's why the offers that got accepted were so high, is because they didn't need work, so people who had more budget were willing to take them on. Whereas I think people who have more budget aren't really willing to take on houses like this that need a bunch of work. At least that was my experience buying. So even with, like I said, saving for 10 years and it being a huge priority for me, I was literally barely able to enter the market here in Minneapolis. And luckily I was, and I'm so grateful and excited that I was. But I did also want to disclaim that cost of living differs wildly based on where you live, cost of real estate. Minneapolis actually has some of the lowest cost of living in the nation, and the house prices here that were affordable for me to get into the market would get you like nothing in a lot of places in this country. I think most places, like, I'm not sure I would have been able to buy a house. So I just kind of lucked out in that I live in a really low cost of living area. So if you're watching this and you live in Los Angeles or Denver or so many other places that just have a much more expensive real estate market, we're definitely in very, very different situations, because I never would have been able to buy a house in a market like that. So I did just want to put those disclaimers out there. Now to give some general advice about young people trying to save to buy a house. I think that, there's just kind of more general budgeting, figure out what money you need each month for your actual expenses, and then what amount you can set aside for savings and putting that in a savings account. It really is a bit of a time game. You just need a certain amount of time to accumulate a certain amount of money. I think if you are able and your life allows it, I know a lot of people can't, but there are side hustles that can allow you to earn a bit more income and therefore save a bit quicker. Yeah, and also if you are a first-time homebuyer, I will say I would look into first-time homebuyer programs. A lot of cities do have assistance programs to help first-time homebuyers basically enter the market. And I know people who have taken advantage of those programs. They really do work and do allow people who maybe feel like they couldn't buy a house actually buy a house. Like, you'd be surprised. So I will say, if you really are keen on buying a house, you can look into those programs and they may apply to you and may help you get into the market sooner than you think you would be able to. I think that's kind of all the advice I have, because I don't want to get too specific, because like I said, everyone's situation is different. But I think just, if possible, making it a priority, and if possible, maybe finding a secondary source of income. But there's a lot of other things to take into consideration. A lot of people aren't able to prioritize savings because of other expenses. A lot of people aren't able to take on a second source of income because they need that time for other more important things. So I hope that was kind of helpful and at least gave you some context into my situation. And I just want to reiterate, now that this video is over, how incredibly grateful I am, and that this video is intended just to share my experience and also some context for anyone who wanted it. But at the end of the day, it's really important to me that you know how grateful I am, and that I am 100% not taking any of this for granted. And I am really excited to share this new era with you. And if you have any more questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer, but I'm gonna be honest, and this applies to the whole video, I am not an expert. This was just my experience and my feelings surrounding the experience. I think it will differ for everyone, and I think that in general, the best thing to do is find some people you can trust and keep them in your corner, whether that's a realtor or a family friend or a parent who can give advice. Really, I think the hardest part about the whole process is just information gathering and learning all these new things that you didn't know before, and having people in your corner you can trust to provide that information definitely makes everything about the home buying process a lot easier. So that is my little Q&A/advice session. I hope it was helpful, and I hope I didn't say anything too misleading. I hope there's not like a realtor watching who's like, actually, you got that all wrong. I think I got it right. That was my experience. So anyways, yeah, I will see you very soon in another video. I hope this was enjoyable, and I'll chat with you soon. Bye, friends.